Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful Gossips 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Brooke Logan had always believed she'd seen and survived every kind of betrayal, heartbreak, and scandal that could possibly rip through a family like a storm. But on this particular morning at the Forrester estate, as the winter sun slanted through the tall windows and cast long golden stripes across the polished floor, she sensed something shifting beneath the surface, something colder, heavier, more dangerous than the usual whisperings of jealousy and power plays that had filled her life for decades. And while she tried to tell herself she was simply being dramatic, simply overthinking the little inconsistencies she'd noticed over the past few weeks, she couldn't shake the prickling feeling at the back of her neck, a subtle intuition she'd learned never to ignore, because whenever her instincts told her that something was wrong, she was usually right, especially when it came to her family and the people she loved, and the secret she was about to uncover would not only shatter years of assumptions but would threaten to unravel the fragile peace keeping the Forresters, Logans, and Spencers from tearing each other apart once again. For in the world of fashion, legacy, and pride, truth was often the most dangerous weapon, and this truth, this one impossible, unbelievable truth, was about to explode in her face. It began when Hope appeared at her mother's house unexpectedly, looking flustered, her hands shaking slightly as she set her purse down on the table, her eyes darting around the living room like she was terrified that someone might overhear them even though they were alone. And when Brooke gently pressed her to explain what was going on, Hope hesitated, swallowed hard, and whispered that she had stumbled onto something she wished she could unsee, something that had been hidden from the entire family, something she didn't know how to process or how to move forward from. And though the words tumbled out slowly, Brooke could see her daughter was genuinely frightened. Hope explained that she had gone to Forrester Creations late the previous night to retrieve a file she'd left in the design office, only to hear voices coming from Eric's office, voices that shouldn't have been there at that hour. And when she moved closer, the shock of what she saw had nearly brought her to her knees. Brooke held her breath, waiting for her daughter to continue, and Hope finally revealed that she'd seen Ridge arguing with someone in the office, but that someone wasn't Brooke, wasn't Steffi, wasn't Carter or Eric or even Thomas. No, Ridge was speaking in a tone Hope had never heard before to a woman whose identity she didn't recognize at first, a woman who stepped out of the shadows with a chilling smile and a level of familiarity that instantly terrified Hope. It was Shauna Fulton, a name Brooke thought she had successfully exorcised from all their lives. A ghost from another era of manipulation and emotional warfare. And if Shauna had truly returned, it could only mean trouble. But it wasn't just her return that shocked Hope. No, the real bombshell was what she overheard, the whispered confession that made Hope freeze in place, because Ridge wasn't simply talking to Shauna. He was begging her to keep quiet about something monumental, something life-altering, and that was when Hope heard Shauna say the sentence that would ignite everything. "Ridge, she can't ever know that the child is alive." The room spun for Brooke as Hope repeated the words, because that sentence, vague as it was, pointed to a secret so devastating she could hardly breathe while imagining the possibilities. Whose child? What did Shauna mean, and why would Ridge be involved in something like this? Brooke's stomach twisted, and she felt the crushing weight of a mother's instinct screaming that this wasn't just some misunderstanding or innocent miscommunication. This was a cover-up, a deception, a secret that had been deliberately buried, and now it was clawing its way to the surface with frightening force. Hope, still trembling, told her mother that Ridge sounded desperate, terrified, even begging Shauna not to reveal the truth because it would destroy everything. And Brooke, despite her long, complicated history with Ridge, felt a jolt of betrayal run through her chest like cold lightning, because even at their worst Ridge had always come to her with the truth in the end, but now it seemed he had decided to hide something so huge, so life-altering, that he would risk everything to keep it buried. Brooke promised Hope she would get to the bottom of this, even though part of her wondered if she could survive yet another secret detonating in her life, but she was determined to find out the truth no matter how painful it would be. And the moment Hope left, Brooke grabbed her keys and drove straight to Forrester Creations with a sense of urgency pounding through her veins, her thoughts spiraling as she replayed that one horrifying line, "The child is alive." When she arrived at the office, the building was quiet, almost eerily so, and she hurried down the hallway toward Ridge's office, only to find him standing there alone, staring down at some sketches as though nothing in the world was wrong. But the moment he looked up and saw her, the shift in his expression, shock, guilt, fear, confirmed everything she hadn't wanted to believe. Brooke demanded answers, her voice sharp, raw, fueled by a mixture of heartbreak and righteous anger. And Ridge tried at first to dodge the questions, to deflect, to pretend he didn't know what she was talking about. But Brooke wouldn't let him sidestep her. Not this time. Not when something so serious was at stake. And after several tense minutes, Ridge finally broke, running a hand through his hair before admitting that yes, Shauna had returned. And yes, there was a secret he hadn't told her. A secret he'd hoped would never surface again. But he insisted he had done everything he did to protect everyone involved. Brooke felt the room closing in around her as Ridge hesitated, then finally whispered the words that shattered her heart. The secret involved a child who was believed to be dead, a child whose supposed death had caused immeasurable grief. But the truth was more twisted and heartbreaking than anyone could have imagined. Ridge confessed that years ago, during one of the darkest chapters in their family history, a baby connected to someone close to them, someone who had mourned endlessly, had actually survived, hidden away by someone who believed they were protecting the child from danger, someone who manipulated circumstances to ensure the world would continue believing the baby had died, and that someone was Shauna. Brooke's mouth fell open as Ridge went on to explain that Shauna had orchestrated the entire deception with the help of a former hospital employee, ensuring the infant was removed before anyone could discover the truth, raising the child in secret until circumstances forced her to give the child up. And Ridge had only learned the truth months earlier when Shauna resurfaced unexpectedly, threatening to reveal everything unless Ridge helped her secure a future she believed she deserved. Brooke's blood boiled as she realized Ridge had allowed Shauna to manipulate him yet again. But beneath the anger was a deeper devastation. Who was the child, and how could Ridge have kept this from her? Ridge's voice cracked as he told her the truth. The child was connected to the Logan family, someone who had grieved a loss they never should have endured. And Brooke felt her entire world tilt as Ridge revealed that the child in question was not some distant relative or forgotten tragedy. It was a child Hope had once believed she lost when she thought her infant had died during childbirth years ago, before the truth about Beth eventually came to light. Brooke's hand flew to her mouth as Ridge continued, explaining that before the truth about Beth was revealed, there had been another baby in the maternity ward who was declared dead. Another baby whose grieving mother had eventually accepted the tragedy. But that baby had never died at all. Shocked to her core, Brooke whispered the name she was now terrified to speak. Was Ridge saying there was another one, another child, another daughter that Hope had never known survived? Ridge nodded, tears welling in his eyes, telling her that the secret had been buried so deeply that even he had only uncovered it recently. And he hadn't told her because he didn't know how to process the truth himself, nor how to confront Hope with something so devastating. Brooke staggered backward, her heart pounding violently, tears spilling as she imagined what this revelation would do to her daughter's already fragile emotional world. And she demanded to know where the child was now, what had happened to her, how Shauna had kept this quiet for so long. Ridge explained that the child, now a young teen, had been living under a new identity, placed with a family far from Los Angeles, and while Shauna had not raised the child directly, she kept close tabs and maintained control over the secret, using it whenever she needed leverage. Brooke, overwhelmed with grief, fury, and disbelief, felt something inside her snap, a new determination igniting through the heartbreak. This was her grandchild, Hope's flesh and blood, a child who had been stolen from their family, and she vowed then and there she would not let one more day go by without uncovering every last detail, finding the child, and bringing her home, no matter what it cost. And as Ridge tried to calm her, insisting they needed to proceed carefully, Brooke turned away. Knowing that nothing and no one would stop her now, not Ridge's hesitation, not Shauna's manipulation, not the fear of reopening old wounds, because a mother's fight was powerful, but a grandmother's fury was unstoppable. And as she walked out of that office, her heels echoing sharply against the floor, Brooke Logan knew this was only the beginning of a battle that would reshape every relationship in their family. A battle fueled by loss, betrayal, secrets, and the unbreakable love that had always defined her, and nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again once the truth fully came to light. But as Brooke stormed out of Forrester Creations with her pulse racing and her emotions in chaos, she could already feel the weight of the battle settling onto her shoulders, a burden she had been forced to carry many times before. But this time it was different. This time it involved a child, a stolen life, a grandchild she never even knew existed, and the very idea of that ignited something primal inside her. A fierce protectiveness she had no intention of holding back. And as she got into her car, gripping the steering wheel with trembling hands, she thought of Hope, of how fragile her daughter had been recently, of how hard she had worked to maintain her stability after everything that had happened with Thomas, Liam, Beth, Luna, the endless heartbreak that kept tearing her apart year after year. And Brooke felt tears gather in her eyes at the thought of how another devastating revelation might crush her all over again. But she also knew that Hope had a right to the truth, a right to know her child was alive somewhere out there, living a life built on lies and manipulation. And Brooke refused to let Ridge or Shauna or anyone else decide when or how that truth would come to light. Driving home, her mind kept replaying Ridge's confession, each detail making her chest tighten more painfully. And though she loved Ridge deeply, though their history was long and complicated and full of reconciliations and heartbreaks, she couldn't ignore the sense of betrayal clawing at her heart. He had known about this for months and said nothing, allowing Hope to walk around every day without knowing her own daughter was alive, and Brooke couldn't understand how he had justified that. Yes, Ridge believed he was protecting people, but at what cost? How could keeping a mother from her child ever be the right thing? When Brooke finally stepped into her house, the silence felt heavy, suffocating, and she had to sit down just to steady herself, her breath shaky as she tried to process the enormity of everything she had just learned. But the moment she closed her eyes, she saw Hope's face, saw the pain she had already endured, saw the countless times life had broken her, and Brooke knew she couldn't waste a second. She pulled out her phone and dialed the one person she trusted to help her investigate quietly. Justin Barber, a man who had once betrayed the Forresters, but who now worked tirelessly to rebuild his reputation and regain their trust. Justin answered quickly, his voice curious and alert, and when Brooke told him she needed him to come to her house immediately, he didn't hesitate. Within 20 minutes, he was standing in her living room, listening intently as she explained everything Ridge had confessed. Justin's expression darkened with every sentence, and by the time she finished, he promised he would use every resource at his disposal to track down the truth. Names, locations, hospital records, adoption files, anything that could reveal where the child was now. Brooke thanked him, but inside she felt an ache growing, a terrible dread building, because she knew that the moment this secret came out, her world would explode in ways she wasn't sure she was prepared for. And she wasn't wrong. Because while Brooke was setting her plan into motion, Shauna Fulton was already one step ahead, watching everything unfold from the shadows with a calculating smile. Shauna had returned to Los Angeles not out of guilt or remorse, but because she wanted something. Money, power, leverage, perhaps even revenge. And revealing the existence of a child tied to the Logan family gave her exactly that. But Shauna underestimated Brooke Logan, underestimated the depth of love and fire that fueled her. And as Brooke and Justin began digging into the past, Shauna realized her grip on the secret was slipping, and she began scrambling to regain control. Meanwhile, Ridge paced in his office at Forrester Creations, guilt twisting in his stomach like a knife as he imagined what Brooke was doing at that moment. How hurt she must be, how betrayed she probably felt, and the truth was he hadn't meant to deceive her, not at first, but after Shauna dropped the bombshell into his life months earlier, he hadn't known how to even begin untangling the lies. He told himself he was protecting Hope, protecting everyone, but deep down he knew he should have told Brooke the second he learned the truth, and now that decision was coming back to destroy everything he cared about. As the hours passed, Brooke grew increasingly restless, pacing the living room while she waited for Justin to send her the first updates, and when her phone finally buzzed, her heart stopped. Justin had uncovered the first thread. A name tied to the forged hospital file. A woman who had once worked under Dr. Reese Buckingham during the same period when Hope had believed Beth had died. Brooke's blood ran cold when she saw that name because she recognized it immediately. Sandy Quintero, a former nurse who had vanished suddenly after the Beth baby switch scandal was exposed. Justin told her he was already tracking Sandy's last known address. And Brooke's stomach dropped as she realized that this conspiracy might be far deeper than Ridge even knew. Meanwhile, back at Forrester Creations, Hope stood alone in the design office, staring blankly at a mannequin draped with soft white fabric. But she wasn't thinking about fashion. Not today. Her mind kept cycling back to what she had overheard between Ridge and Shauna, and the fear in Ridge's voice haunted her. She told herself she might have misheard, misinterpreted, blown something out of proportion, but deep down she knew better, because in this family, secrets were never small and lies were never harmless. When Brooke finally returned to the office hours later, her eyes red but her posture determined, Hope immediately sensed something was wrong and rushed to her side, demanding to know what Ridge had said, what the truth was, what they were dealing with. Brooke felt her heart break all over again as she looked at her daughter, and for a moment she considered lying, sparing Hope from the unbearable truth for just a little while longer, but she couldn't. A mother doesn't lie to her child to protect a man. So Brooke took a deep breath, her voice trembling as she told Hope everything Ridge had revealed, and the moment the words left her mouth, Hope went completely still, her eyes wide, her lips parting in disbelief as the meaning of the truth sank in. Hope whispered the question Brooke had been dreading. "Mom, are you saying my daughter is alive?" Brooke broke down then, unable to hold back her tears, and she pulled Hope into her arms as her daughter's legs buckled beneath her, the sobs ripping from her chest like her heart was being torn apart. It was the kind of grief that held a razor edge of hope, the kind that shattered and rebuilt someone at the same time, and Brooke held her tightly, rocking her gently as she whispered that they would find the girl. They would bring her home. They would uncover every lie and expose every person who kept this secret buried. The intensity of the moment was overwhelming, raw, and devastating, but Brooke knew it was only going to get worse from here, because once the rest of the family learned the truth, once Liam, Thomas, Steffi, Finn, Taylor, Carter, Eric, and everyone else connected to this tangled web found out, Los Angeles would become a battlefield of emotions, loyalties, and accusations. Ridge, standing outside the office door, heard Hope's sobs and felt his heart break as guilt crashed over him in suffocating waves, but he couldn't bring himself to step inside. Not yet. Not when Hope deserved space to breathe through the horror of what she had just learned. But he also knew he couldn't hide from the consequences forever, and when he finally walked into that room, eyes filled with shame, Hope looked at him with a mixture of shock, betrayal, and heartbreak that cut him to his core. And that was when Brooke realized that this secret, this one devastating truth, had the power to destroy Ridge's relationship with both her and Hope forever, unless they found the child before Shauna made her next move. Hope stared at Ridge with tears streaming down her cheeks, her breathing uneven as she tried to process everything she had just learned, and her voice cracked as she asked him the question that had been clawing at her mind since the truth unraveled. Why would he keep something like this from her? Why would he let her walk around every day believing she had only one daughter when another piece of her heart was out there somewhere, stolen from her without her knowledge, living a life she never got to be a part of? Ridge swallowed hard, his own eyes glistening, and he tried to explain, tried to tell her that when Shauna first came to him, he hadn't believed her, hadn't wanted to believe her, because the information was too explosive, too painful, too unbelievable, and he needed time to verify it before he shattered Hope's world again. But Hope shook her head, unable to accept that justification, because a mother should have been told the second there was even a whisper of possibility that her child was alive. Brooke stepped forward, placing a hand on Hope's shoulder, grounding her, steadying her, silently reminding her she wasn't alone in this nightmare. And she turned her attention back to Ridge, her voice calm but edged with steel as she said that he had no right at all, to decide when Hope was ready to hear the truth, no right to protect Shauna, no right to carry a secret of such magnitude without telling the mother whose life was directly affected. Ridge lowered his head, the guilt swallowing him whole, because deep down he knew she was right. But before another word could be said, Brooke's phone buzzed again, and when she saw Justin's name her heart skipped a beat. She answered, her voice shaking slightly, and Justin told her that he had tracked Sandy Quintero to a small town outside of Monterey, that she was living under a new alias and working at a private clinic, and that he believed Sandy held the final piece of information, the file that could confirm the child's identity and location beyond any doubt. Brooke's breath caught as Justin added that he could be on a plane within the hour if Brooke wanted him to go. But Brooke shook her head instinctively, telling him she would go herself, that this was her granddaughter, her family, and she wasn't trusting anyone else with something this important. When she hung up, she turned to Hope, who had gone pale but steady, a quiet resolve settling into her expression. "I'm coming with you," Hope whispered, her voice trembling but firm, and Brooke nodded, knowing she couldn't deny her daughter the chance to fight for her child. Ridge took a step forward, offering to go with them, offering to help, but Hope looked at him with a mixture of pain and disappointment that made his chest tighten. "You've done enough," she said softly, and that single sentence hit harder than any scream could have. And just like that, the line between them shifted. Hope and Brooke united in a mission, Ridge left behind with the wreckage of his choices, and Shauna somewhere in Los Angeles, preparing for the storm she knew was coming. Because once Brooke and Hope reached Monterey, Once Sandy was found, once the truth was undeniable, a missing daughter would be pulled back into the Logan world, and everything, absolutely everything, would explode.